Hi, I'm Ketki,
And I'm Sanaya.
and we're Thinking People. Today, we're thinking about Bollywood, the industry, its stars, and why it feels like it's fallen into a crisis of ideas over the past few years. We'll be joined by Swapnil Rai, assistant professor in the Department of Film, Television, and Media at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. She talks to us about her new book, Network Bollywood: How Star Power Globalized Hindi Cinema, and how an uncertain future for the industry's megastars might signal major shifts in how we think about Bollywood.
Life moves fast. Tune in to think about it.
Hi, Sanaya.
Hi, Ketki. How are you today?
Good. Just, breathing in toxic fumes, air, you know.
Yes. Throwback to our previous episode. The pollution has befallen, it has arrived. Today, we are actually thinking and talking about Bollywood. And I feel like this is something that you have special expertise in since you used to work at Hotstar. So you have a unique insight into how the industry functions. But just from your own perspective, I know that we've spoken about this, off mic quite a bit, that watch new movies, Bollywood seems to keep churning them out. And whenever we watch them, we're just underwhelmed or coming out of the theater not happy at all. So, could you just give like a little, I don't know, recap of what the last post pandemic Bollywood has kind of been like in your eyes?
Underwhelming is the first word that comes to mind. I think it's interesting because the one thing that's definitely shifted for me post pandemic is one, I of course moved out of Hotstar in 2022. So I was naturally not going to be as close to the Bollywood scene as I was before. But I have found myself not feeling as interested in watching as many films and not really compelled by any of the ideas that have been coming out in Bollywood. I think the biggest thing for me is that I don't, I can't, and we've spoken about this, it's that I can't think of a single Bollywood film from the past 5 years which has really stayed with me in a real way. Perhaps, I mean, maybe there's one or two films and I enjoyed watching them, but I don't really think that there's been a single film that I think watched and I'm like, oh, okay, that has moved the needle in some way, or I think that this film is one that people are going to be thinking about years from now. It is sort of the zeitgeist defining film. It is the film of the moment. And maybe there are films that I chose not to sort of watch for certain reasons, like, there's been a release of a lot of propaganda films or films like Animal, which people have really taken to and reacted. There have been like receptions at both ends of the spectrum. People have really loved the film or really hated it. So I'm sure there have been certain zeitgeist defining movies, perhaps. And if these are the films that are defining Bollywood zeitgeist, like I think the other question is, am I just not, being able to relate or being able to find kind of stories that I want within Bollywood? And so what I'm feeling is disconnect with Bollywood, which is has typically been an industry that I have followed. And it's been an industry that's been hard to miss. And I think what's happened over the past couple of years is that it's just sort of passed me by. There are so many films that come out and come into theaters and they leave, and I don't even catch wind of them.
So, when I was growing up, if you wanted to watch a movie and you wanted to see what was playing where, and this is before Book My Show, before apps, you would open the newspaper, the second or third page of Pune Times, Bombay Times, Delhi Times, The Times, the City Supplement, that would have all the movie listings. And on top of each movie, you'd see 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. So each of the movies would be celebrating like a certain amount of time in playing in theaters. And I feel like that was a significant achievement. And even the fact that, DDLJ was playing for 20 straight years from 95 to 2015, the amount of that it would play in the cinema and the amount of interest it would hold within the public for an uninterrupted period of time was a marker of the film's success. And I think that that's like kind of, I feel like maybe I am like harking back to that idea of Bollywood, which, as Swapnil sort of says in the later on when she joins us for our conversation, like the industry has changed so much. And no movie is released with that time frame in mind that we want to keep playing in the cinema for as long as possible. All the movies want to streaming releases right after it's played in the theater. There's like a lot of conversation around what's the right time to do that. Maybe some movies do it a little too soon. So I feel like that may be one of the reasons why things are passing us by.
No, it very much is. And like I can even speak to that because these kind of things are written into the contract. Like you'll have a streaming partner as you see, like if you go to watch any film in the theater, you'll see that there's a streaming partner, and the streaming partner usually wants you to have a clause in the contract that says that like this film can't really play for more than 4 weeks. And then after that it has to come onto our OTT platform. So that does limit how long a film can play in the theaters.
Yeah, so you're going from a shared space for a viewing experience into a fragmented space for a viewing experience with a contracted timeline. And I was thinking more about this. I know we've been, mulling over this episode for a very long time, but I was thinking about how, there are so many movies that are on streaming, which I've sort of heard that are great. Like, something like Monica, Oh My Darling. And, my mom recently told me to watch Jaane Jaan, which is a recent release with Kareena Kapoor in it. The trailer looked great. I didn't even know it existed. So I feel like a lot of audience fragmentation has happened. And I think this is another thing that we wanted to sort of explore with Swapnil, which is that do all of these streaming movies classify as Bollywood in the traditional sense,
What space
right?
do they take? Yeah.
Yeah. One of my favorite movies, like one movie which I feel like has kind of stayed with me from the past 5 years, was a streaming movie, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was Darlings, and I keep going back to it, and I'm like, wow, that was such a great story. It was very well written. Obviously, Alia Bhatt is a great actor, so it was well executed. But again, it's sort of seen as a streaming movie, and never opened in the theater. So yeah.
The biggest thing I think about Bollywood, and especially I think when I was sort of consuming Bollywood, was I think at its peak and when Bollywood sort of it had uh, just entered this new age, right? Like this new modern age for Bollywood, which is the 2000s and the early 2010s. And at that time, I think the big thing, this of course has to do with distribution, is that a person would be watching the same Bollywood movie in Mumbai and like Rampur in Uttar Pradesh, and the that I think has also changed, which is that the same films are not reaching the same audiences. Like you said, it's a very fragmented media scape, of course, but I also think that like the mid-budget film is not reaching the smaller audiences as well. So there's not as many films have been able to cut across through the masses, and that ultimately has also defined the staying power of a Bollywood film, which is much like what is that pan India appeal? And those same structures aren't in place. And one could even wonder, like, could it even be a fault in the storytelling? Like, have has Bollywood unable to even write the film that might have that level of staying power? So that like I think the last film that I can think of was a Jawan or a Pathan, but then again that relies on the star, right, which is Shah Rukh. And of course Shah Rukh is going to have like a big theatrical release. I think the landscape has changed quite significantly, and of course, that has impacted Bollywood. I think with streaming also, like on a very personal level, I think you said that your mom asked you to watch Jaane Jaan. I think you've asked me to watch Darlings. You've told me good things about it. Other friends have told me good things about it. I don't know what the reservation is, but I'm not as inclined to watch OTT releases as much. I again, I think it has to do with just how maybe I associate Bollywood. Like if I am to watch a Bollywood film, I prefer to go see it in the cinema. And I would possibly only watch it on OTT if like I have really heard good things about it, and then I'm like, sure. But even then, it's like it's it's really hard for me to watch a film on OTT. And I think it is because Bollywood for me is associated with that level of grandiosity that you can only achieve at in a cinema viewing, uh, perhaps. But that being said, I also think that there have been very few stories that have come out which have actually piqued my attention. All this to say that, like, okay, Bollywood, the way in which films are made and produced and all of that has changed. The way in which films are distributed has changed. Of course, that's in fact a reality. I mean, it's true of Hollywood as well, which is why there's many rom-coms, because production houses have deprioritized the mid-budget film. I'm sure that trickles down into Bollywood as well. But that being said, if you are to look at the big releases, the big massy productions like a Jawan or a Pathan, um, yes, these films have cut across, but I can bet that they are not going to resonate or be memorable like even a decade down the line. I think they're not even memorable even right now, a year down the line. And I think that has to do with the fact that Bollywood just doesn't know how to tell a good story anymore. It To me, it seems like it's going through a little bit of an identity crisis. I don't quite know what it wants to say when it's not acting as like a mouthpiece for a political agenda. How is it pushing the needle? How is it shaping culture? And what are the trends that are emerging in Bollywood? They are completely absent to me. And anything that you see is either like mimicking something from the past, or, it's trying to ape something that is already working well in the present, whether it's a Hollywood production or a, production from like like a Malayalam film industry or something like that. So this is the crisis to me. And as a result, as an audience, as a receiver all of this, I just like I go back to my earlier point, which is that my interest in Bollywood as an industry has diminished quite greatly because I don't feel like watching any of the films.
So I feel like I've been saying this for a long time, and this is not specific to Bollywood, but I have felt this way about some of the bigger Bollywood releases from at least the past year. I think that linear storytelling is generally a dying art form right now. Just a basic plot with, an introduction, a slow build, a climax, a third act, that traditional storytelling form, and tying up all the loose ends. You introduce something in the first act and it makes a reappearance in the third act, like all of those storytelling tricks. I feel like either they have fallen out of fashion, or people just aren't as skilled at it as they once were, because every time I feel like I'm watching any kind of movie from 10 to 15 years ago, I feel like that tight storytelling was very much intact even in an averagely rated movie, right? um and I mean, we recently watched Gladiator, and that really was not good. Like, that was just a terrible, terrible execution of a beloved movie. It's expanded into a franchise and it's lessened what that movie means, right? Overall. And what I felt even in this movie, and to an extent even in the bigger releases like Pathan and Jawan last year, is that when you have such a huge budget, and budgets were never this big, right? In Bollywood, they were never ever this big. Even and Gladiator's budget was 300 million. That's insane for like a non-Marvel movie. But anyway, so you when you have such a huge budget, you have to figure out how to use it. And then the figuring out how to use it is to think about like VFX and special effects, and how can we then make the most out of this production funds that we have. And then your writing kind of follows that. And I felt that Dune as well, Dune 1 and 2. Like, I thought Dune 1 was like a movie that was both introducing us to the story and kind of climaxing for 2.5 hours or however long that movie is. And just the basic tenets of storytelling, where you're introduced to a new world, you have these characters whom you want to care about, and then you're invested in their stories and their motives, and you want to feel that catharsis and that satisfaction and that payoff towards the end. I feel like that has fallen to the wayside when you are trying to create a capital B blockbuster. And I definitely felt that with Jawan and Pathan. Like, sure, I enjoyed it because it was Shah Rukh's comeback, but the plot was all over the place. And like at the same time, I watched Badshah for the first time, a couple of weeks ago, a month ago or so, and very low budget movie. But that plot was airtight, man. All the twists, like Bollywood used to be about the twists. Bollywood used to be about like the good guy who is actually bad, or the bad guy who's actually the hero or whatever. Like those kinds of twists which are revealed towards the end. Like those kinds of basic storytelling tricks which everybody enjoys, no matter how predictable they are. Like people have just decided that's not serving them anymore. So let's try and make a visual spectacle. And that when the story suffers in that way, that's when it's not as memorable. You don't feel like rewatching something. I know it's a little unfair, I think, for us to even say that maybe Pathan, Jawan, and these movies are not zeitgeist defining because I don't know, maybe there's a kid somewhere out there who's like, Pathan's my favorite movie. We don't know what this 10-year-old child thinks, right? And when they grow up and become like a 25-year-old, film student, maybe they're going to be evoking Pathan in their like film studies, whatever assignment or whatever. But all that being said, just from like a traditional storytelling standpoint, it's kind of all over the place. And I feel like maybe the reason why you're not feeling as compelled to watch every single new movie on streaming, first of all, there are a lot of movies on all the time. And it's not just Bollywood or not just Hindi cinema at any given moment in time. It's also TV shows and it's also movies from other parts of the world. Um, but I think one of the things that even I think Swapnil did a good job of kind of characterizing what makes a Bollywood film. And, for example, a lot of these streaming movies, they don't have like, you know, musical numbers in the same way that a traditional Bollywood movie would.
Where are the big songs? You know, where are the era defining songs? Like, to your point, also, I think, like, traditionally, one has not associated Bollywood with innovation. Like, I don't think it's ever really been an innovation first industry. And, you could even say that it's been formulaic, but it really knew how to execute that formula very, very, very well. And that formula was what you are saying is the linear storytelling. Bollywood knew and had figured out like what its base story should be. And there needs to be a love story, maybe an action sequence, and like three songs that integrate into the story somehow. And you would create that, and at the end of it you would have this formulaic but very, very entertaining film. Now, of course, there has been criticism of just that itself and like constantly replicating that model. And I think that formula itself is being questioned or tested in the wake of access to all of these different types of films from all over the world, and maybe audiences are not as taken with it anymore. But you can't help but feel nostalgic about it also, because you're not even seeing Bollywood do that well anymore. So it's interesting because the story isn't there yet. All of the embellishments are there. Like, so with Jawan, they're trying to work with a director from the south, or they're trying to add in like all of these exciting action sequences. So in Rocky or Rani, you have like all of these old like Hindi Bollywood songs, like sequences of like actors within the film singing those songs, and like these over the top things, but they don't really come together. And it's almost as if like the formula or like the recipe that you need to bake the cake is being ignored, and you're really just focusing on like the toppings and the frosting. And like it's like, okay, the frosting is yummy but the cake is not. It's like that. To me, is the analogy that comes to mind. And how I would perceive Bollywood today.
So that brings us to at least what in our mind sounds like a crisis of ideas. And I'm sure we're going to unpack that a lot more with Swapnil in our next segment. Okay, hi everyone. Hi Ketki. Hi Swapnil. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Thinking People podcast. We are very excited, Swapnil, to have you here to dive into Bollywood's crisis of ideas, to maybe see if it is even a crisis of ideas or maybe it's a different kind of crisis that it's going through. But either way, it seems like Bollywood seems to have stagnated a bit, found itself in a little bit of a rut. And we're super excited to have you here to unpack some of the possible reasons behind this. So, in your book, Networked Bollywood, which is absolutely fascinating because it's putting forward this new theory of globalization in many senses of trying to understand how the Hindi film industry or Bollywood, and through its stars, is establishing this global brand for India. But I think what would be super useful to set the stage for this conversation is to kind of unpack what we even mean by Bollywood, because I feel like a lot of times we end up taking it for granted. And I think you did a great job of really making the reader think about this term that we just throw around. So could you just tell us what you mean by Bollywood or what you think Bollywood is?
Yeah, well, that's a good place to start, actually, Sanaya. So, Bollywood, the term we all know is a portmanteau term, brings together Bombay and Hollywood. One of the reasons why, like, I use Bollywood in my book, despite the fact that many Bollywood people do not like using that term, um, is precisely because of the reason you mentioned, because it's the story of Hindi cinema's globalization, like across phases. And so Bollywood, the term itself makes Bollywood feel like a lesser imitative industry, like that comes after Hollywood. But one of the things that our listeners would want to remember. And one thing I emphasize in my book is that it starts contemporaneously to Hollywood. So it's not like we started when the term becomes popular, and it's much later that the term Bollywood is given and is popularized. However, I still use that term, like I said, as a provocation because in the 2000s, after filmmaking was officially recognized as an industry, and for the first 100 years of its history, it wasn't a formal industry. So when it becomes a formal industry, that is when it becomes like global in a way that people everywhere like start to sit up and take notice. Okay. So this is something that we need to contend with. And within the global space, how Bollywood itself becomes more than films. It becomes this kind of amorphous cultural form. So, one small example was like in Austin, Texas, where I got my PhD, for example, the Indian Independence Day, 15th August, was celebrated as Austin Bollywood Day, right? Where people would go and do like flash mobs outside of the state capital in Austin. And so you see how the term itself, like it's Bollywood, but it becomes sort of a signifier of diasporic cultural identity. There's Bollywood restaurants that signal Indian food, that there's like Bollywood yoga, Bollywood everything, you name it. So since the 2000s, as this kind of very rapid cultural percolation of the industry, and with it, how it's changed quickly into, like I said, a bigger cultural form that morphs and has become this mammoth entertainment industry. It's in that sense of the word that I use Bollywood. You know, taking off of this idea that Ashish Dhaksha points out, that it's the Bollywoodization of everything, right? And I take it a step further to say that Bollywood as a cultural form, how it changes. But then I also say that it wasn't just in that 2000s, a singular moment of rupture, that it becomes Bollywood, that the industry had always been global. And that is why, since its inception, I trace its history, how it is a proto network in the early phase to an emergent network to what I now call Network Bollywood.
No, I think that thinking of Bollywood as, I feel like I implicitly would always refer to it when I would say Bollywood when I'm referring to like Hindi movies. And I think I was collapsing the two quite a bit. So thinking of it as this broader industry was very interesting, especially because I think the reason why we wanted to have this conversation was that we felt like there is a kind of deprioritization of the story or the emotional appeal or resonance of some of these movies. And I mean, if you think of this film industry as, a profit-making enterprise that is trying to expand globally, it makes it make more sense why certain things that may resonate with an audience are kind of being deprioritized in as a trade-off to let's reach more markets, let's reach more people. But and I also found it interesting, and I wonder if you have any thoughts about this, which is that I feel like as an industry, Bollywood seems to be like less concerned with things like, diversity and representation, which is something that has become incredibly, salient for Hollywood in recent years. Uh, and in the whole idea of the star, as you mentioned in your book, being like the deal and the deal maker and the face of the movie. People will go to watch if, Shah Rukh Khan's in the movie, if Salman Khan's in the movie. But people won't be angry if a particular movie does not do justice to its heroines, right? If they don't get meaty roles, it doesn't matter. So I wonder if this is something that you've thought about from like that whole entry perspective of like these other aspects that could potentially define an industry.
So there's a few things. So one of the key theorizations in my book is this concept of star switching power, which basically speaks to, in some ways, all of these things that you mentioned. So basically, it's talking about how only certain stars, only certain kinds of male megastars could possess, centrality within industrial networks. And when you use the term centrality, it means it it's a sociological term, but it means what it means, like that you are centrally located in a way that you can connect to a lot of different other networks, hubs, people, right? So when I talk about star switching power, I talk about how certain males, megastars, had the the power, both direct power and affective power. And when I say affective, affect is this way that star personas kind of emotionally move us consciously and subconsciously, that tied to them really being centrally situated, like you use the phrase from my book that they are the deal and the deal maker, because they are the proprietors of some of the biggest business companies, and so they have that kind of direct industrial power. And so how they were able to create ways for Indian cinema to globalize. Now, in telling of that story, you were talking about the marginal liminal spaces. It has been historically a very gendered masculinist industry. And it's not, we haven't had big female stars, but they had never possessed that kind of centrality that the men did, because they could not muster it in similar ways, because at the very outset, like structurally, it's a very masculinist and gendered industry. And within that context, as I was doing that research, I also found that when it came to women, uh, there were a lot of other barriers like class and caste. There is one article that I've written that's informed by my theorization in the book, but it's not in the book. It compares three different stars like Devika Rani, Nargis, and Durga Khote, and all three tried to dabble in production, and they were stars, like of varying degrees, but Devika Rani and Nargis equally were huge stars. Durga Khote perhaps not so much, but then Durga Khote had the similar kind of like class and caste centrality. So Devika Rani was like a Brahmin, came from a super elite family, um, and was beautiful, so had this kind of very like aesthetic capital. She was educated in the UK. In fact, in the archives, I found a thing where, they were praising her for her clipped diction because she had better diction than the British. So literally, she was the creme de la creme of Indian society, and she was the only one, the only woman. In the way that I've theorized star switching power, she was the only one that could possess it. So she became the proprietor of a big studio. Nargis was a huge star. She tried, but she couldn't. And there were lots of barriers like her religion, her class background, her, being the daughter of a courtesan, even though her mother was very prominent in the industry. All of these kind of become more of a determining factor when thinking about diversity and other questions. Like the gender becomes the first lens through which everything is filtered. And then there is, there's other factors that further pile on.
I want to bring up, like an anecdote. I mean, it's actually in referencing this NDTV interview that I watched where Amir Khan, Rani Mukherjee, and Kareena Kapoor are promoting Talash. And this is, I think, early 2010s or late 2000s, I think, is when the film came out. I'm not exactly sure. But the journalist, the NDTV journalist, asks Amir, why don't Bollywood actresses get paid the same as Bollywood actors? And he has this really interesting answer, and it went viral on the internet briefly, where he says basically that in Bollywood, um, the fact of the matter is that your fee is connected to your ability to fill the theater. So he says heroines work really hard, but so do cameramen, so do light boys. So all of us should technically be paid equally. But the reason why actresses are paid differently is because the market forces understand that you aren't able to bring in that much money back into a film. So then he looks at Rani and he says, if she was able to fill in more seats than I can, then definitely she should be paid more than I do. And I thought that was such a, you know, um, ignorant answer because he clearly doesn't take into account the larger socio patriarchal context within which his own industry exists. And it kind of speaks to something within Bollywood, which I think even Sanaya is like trying to point out with this question about diversity, which is that in a sense, what Amir Khan is saying is that the moment the audience decides that the actress is important, she will become important. They want the change to come from the audience, and only then will they implement the change. But it never comes from within Bollywood itself. And I feel like that's an interesting way to even look at and analyze Bollywood, which is I don't think like I feel like it's a very risk averse industry. And when we were thinking about this episode, we were basically coming off of a string of just, films that we had seen in like recent releases in Bollywood. And we're like, they're just not up to the mark. They're not holding up a mirror to society, like forget that, but they're not even entertaining in the least. They're not writing good stories. And I feel like there's a lot of, you know, there is a crisis of ideas in the sense that they're not able to either write the kind of stories that will resonate or create the star, which Bollywood has typically relied on, like you mentioned as well, in order to really, create something compelling within the industry. And I think an interesting question here, or like a good place to sort of then pivot into, is analyzing who the Bollywood star is. What does the star mean to Bollywood? And at a time right now where, in a sense, you could even say that the big mega stars of Bollywood are they're kind of, you know, it's their last sort of days in the spotlight. What is then the future of the Bollywood star? Who is the next sort of Bollywood star? And what will Bollywood be without its stars, essentially?
Yeah, that's an interesting pivot, and good that you mentioned Amir Khan because he recently announced his retirement from the industry. So then to think about, well, who is the Bollywood star? So structurally, when I talked about the globalization of this industry since its very inception, uh, it's a given that Bollywood is a star-driven industry. Like you said, everything else that goes into making a Bollywood film, if it's a star vehicle, like if it's a star vehicle, a star project, is subservient to the star. In terms of payment, even the star, if he's part of the project, takes home like the lion's share of whatever the budget for the film is. And everything else kind of fits outside of. And that's how it's been. The story is written around the star for the star. It was great when stars like Raj Kapoor were also like creative thinkers and creating their own narratives and stories, like you and Devanand. And this was like the golden age, the 50s, 60s, when you had what I call like the star-led production clusters. And then you had those and then even Amir Khan is an example of having that kind of creative wherewithal, the production, and taking his creative vision where he wants to take it. Like Shah Rukh Khan, for example, could be an example of that too, to an extent, because that's how he starts. Like my book, I talk about the film Ashoka, where like both these stars start out with global dreams, use their production companies as sort of the launching vehicles for like a movie like Ashoka, a movie like Lagan. And that are new kinds of stories, and how that creates network effects and others start to follow and create similar types of stories. So thinking about like the key difference of who the star is, well, star, like I said, how a star gets created is sort of kind of very amorphous and not so easy to define, but a star is different from an actor, right? Can be good actors, but a star sort of exceeds his acting abilities and is this figure persona that can, have that kind of traction, that kind of affect, has this whole affective economy paraphernalia around them that's so immersive. I mean, these are sort of very obvious questions to which most people know the answers, to say that, okay, our big stars were the Khans, right? And as they are like pushing 50, like closer to 60, on the verge of retirement, they have literally like transformed more from their affective realm to their like direct effective power as industrialists, and are now the proprietors of some of these huge production companies and hubs, like entertainment hubs rather, wherein like their companies also are talent agencies. They also do visual effects. They also like run sports teams and franchises and whatnot. So it's really like expanded the star vehicle, the star brand, into this huge entertainment brandscape where the star itself is the owner. However, now that it's structurally set in a way that it's not just these star companies, but also others. So, um, all of these American talent agencies, homegrown talent agencies, casting agencies, all of these have now a say and a role in the Indian entertainment landscape. The original French show called My Agent, or the Indian version of it, you see how their stars, their power, and their lives and their presence on screen, off screen is mediated through these agents. And these agents are like I said, intermediaries. So it's not that kind of direct pull that a star had, or the way that a star could exist, with this kind of standalone power. That doesn't exist. It only exists for the stars that were already big until the structure of the industry changes. And even so, I mean, it's stars are still different. It's not that Indian stars do not have production companies. You see any number of stars like trying to set up a production company, like wanting like a profit sharing model. But could it ever be set up now that the power is so dissipated and the industry, like in a scalar way, is structured so differently? Can it exist in the same way that it existed for a Shah Rukh Khan? It is hard to say, and I would say unlikely.
I think it's interesting because it's not like there aren't Bollywood stars now. Of course, there are. Like I think of like a Ranveer Singh or an Alia Bhatt, but often the discourse around them is that yes, they are stars, but they don't have the kind of affective, or they don't entrance audiences in the same way that a Shah Rukh Khan does. I mean, will Ranveer Singh have thousands of people standing outside of his house, like, every year on his birthday wishing him? Who knows? But it's interesting to me that, all of these new age stars have come of age in the industry at a time where access to these type of talent agents and these such type of resources, ad deals, etc., are definitely easier from Shah Rukh's time. I think Shah Rukh, Salman, Amir, they became stars at a certain, a very different time in the industry. So one could even argue that today's stars have a lot more resources, but not the same affective power. And I wonder if, for a star to become that mega star, there is that larger than life sort of charisma, um, or something, some sort of like X factor, let's call it, wherein you're able to really capture an audience's attention to the point where, they would do something like stand outside of your house just to wish you on your birthday. Like, what does that take? And I think when people often think about these khans as being stars, I think they think about the audiences and the role that the audiences play. And I wonder if you've thought about it from that perspective also.
So one thing that I'd mentioned before that I would like to point again is that like power doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists in relation to a structure, right? And so industrial structure and other technological structure, how it existed in the way when there was Raj Kapoor. So think about, so I will give you an example, like moving the audience. There was this huge anecdote about how Raj Kapoor's Abara was released by Mosfilm because they were, the Soviets were trying to find films to release. They released Avara uh, prior to Nehru's visit, right? And then the political people here found out that, oh, this film did well, and Nehru was friends with Prithvi Raj Kapoor, and he said, well, your son's film is doing well, let's do like a film delegation. And three of them, so he took a film delegation that included Raj Kapoor. And during the screening, people were so moved that they literally like lifted the car that he was sitting in and carried it to his hotel. So that was some level of affect, right? You also have to remember that this was like an Iron Curtain country, right? That did not have access to, and Avara, as we know, like was very Chaplin-esque, using a lot of different tropes. They did not have access to other kinds of cinema, like mostly like Soviet cinema, which was geared towards like ideological propaganda or, a certain type of cinema. And here you were getting a story about society, things that they could resonate with, in through the star who also had like who looked had sort of blue eyes, very white, looked beautiful, sort of like them. So it generated a kind of affect. And a lot of stars, through their aesthetic capital and things, the way they act, like there's numerous factors that go into why you like. It's not like I can enumerate on my like 5 fingers that, oh, you have to have this. It's a combination. But the more important thing, I think, is that this power exists in relation to a structure. That was a time where they weren't oversaturated with, like, it's not every day that they were watching an Avara or had access to that kind of film. Now, with the industry changing structurally, like in the 2000s were early years, and so 90s, like DDLJ was a film of its own. Like it was unique because it was doing something new, right? And while the industry was structurally changing, 2000s another shift, 2010 another. Now there's just so much diversity in the Indian market. There is um, so many types of content, and there's like sort of an oversaturation of entertainment products, not just from within India, from outside of India, from other vernacular contexts. So you only need to turn on like your Amazon Prime and you can equally enjoy a um, South Indian star, the Tamil star, Telugu star, Malayalam star, those stars that did not have access to the kind of North Indian territories in the way that they have now, right? So There's a lot of leveling that's happened in the way that the industry structure itself has changed, which is not to say that Bollywood has lost its sheen entirely. It hasn't. Ranbir Kapoor and Ranbir Singh still have that kind of like stardom, traction, and whatever. But yeah, the as you say, like the power has shifted because the structure itself has shifted. The industry is not the same.
I think a lot of what we were actually trying to think about is, the staying power of some of the stories that have been coming out of Bollywood. And you mentioned DDLJ. And I think the way in which you sort of described it in your book of it presenting like this new, almost like formula of success for filmmakers to then replicate that, okay, you have an NRI audience, so you have an NRI hero, and then you have this romantic story and it's dramatic, etc. And like if you are able to recreate this, you will have an audience for it. Why is it that Bollywood has, in this period of immense structural change, with the fragmentation of the audience, the proliferation of streaming, I feel like the stories right now don't have that uh, as much cachet as they used to in terms of just staying in people's minds or even reflecting what their lives are like or somehow, reflecting their aspirations back to them. And, a particular conversation Ketki and I once had was, a huge reality of India's economic conditions right now is the gig economy and so many people who are working as delivery partners and delivery agents for all of these like behemoth delivery platforms. And this was before Zwigato was released. But it was released and then it kind of came and went. It's like this flash in the pan. So it's almost like I can't think of a movie which I feel like came and then stayed for a while and stayed in people's minds. And I think the last movie that at least happened, like personally, that happened to me for was Lapata Ladies. And I guess in this scenario, with all of this industrial transformation, why does it feel like either Bollywood doesn't care as much about that kind of cultural impact, or it's trying and it's not able to do it?
I mean, so to your initial, like to get to the core question of like big ideas or innovative ideas. And so it's two questions, two different questions. So innovative big ideas that have lasting power versus cultural impact. Okay. Because not all filmmakers want to create or are there to create a positive cultural impact. Um, as you were talking, I was thinking about films, like two films that actually did do well. This film, Animal, it's a misogynist film, but it did really well. Um, so thinking about like lasting power, because there's certain things that come together to define a successful Bollywood film. Like there has to be the star power, star performance, right? It has to evoke like a certain kind of grandeur. Here it was a very misogynistic grandeur. It was glorifying the wrong things. However, it had big star vehicles, right? Another key aspect is music. There has to be that kind of catchy, innovative music. Now, last time that you and I were talking, I talked to you about like the condition of late capitalism, postmodernism, pastiche parody. While ideologically, I may not agree with a lot of the things that happen in that film, but one thing that I would agree on is that it was innovative. It was originally like a song like Arjun Velli, the way that they took a folk song, the way in which that they used that song and then mixed in with like Old Boy. So however they created the pastiche, taking folk, uh, so that segment worked, right? So the fact that even if it was extremely violent and not certainly like culturally positive or trying to give a positive cultural message, was misogynistic at its core, you cannot deny that it was an innovative movie. So the thing that has the pull is not rehashing like old formulas, but thinking out of the box. It is one of the reasons why South Indian movies are doing well, is because again they're using like the tropes that if you try to take Bollywood away from what Bollywood is, like Bollywood we've already understood and always know as masala. It has to have the music, it has to have the action, it has to have the comedy, it has to have the rasas, right? Which is sort of like a cultural core that defines it. And if you lose it, you are losing your industry itself. So, Lapata Ladies cannot be a mainstream Bollywood hit. Okay. It caters to a certain type of niche audience. It caters to you and I, right? And it's a great film, a great idea, but it is more of the kind of films that started to happen with the multiplex as you kind of started narrowing, thinking about, okay, well, Bareli Ki Barfi, these lunchbox and these kinds of ideas like cater to a niche kind of urban middle class, upper middle class thinking, intellectual thinking that also has a positive cultural impact. But thinking about large like mainstream films that would have staying power, it has to have like a different type of pull, right? And which, like, for all of the wrong reasons or whatever reasons, Animal did have. They they were able to, like, the star factor. They were able to, in fact, recreate Ranbir Kapoor into a bigger. If you look at the next generation of stars, like. Ranbir Kapoor was literally launched. This is another moment that I talk about in my book, like, with the movie Savaria, and Hollywood studios are then like trying to invest in kind of so much of Raj Kapoor nostalgia, and his family lineage was woven into how he was launched and into the movie. And so you see already like how there's sort of a diminishing way in which that kind of standalone stardom like is now being platformed, is being presented, and then now you have him kind of rise up to be sort of a bigger, larger than life star, and how this movie became a vehicle for that. So yeah, and then the cultural impact, well, that's a different thing. Not all filmmakers, they're in this business to make money. So like I said, for India, I for my book, like some people ask me, oh well, she's just saying that, oh, it's gendered. It is gendered. I mean, I don't know how else to nuance it. That's how India is. A lot of like empowerment discourses in India are performative. And at its core, we are a very deeply gendered masculinist society, which is the same way that the industry is. I don't see like how I can even like question it. And for beyond saying, first understand that this is how it is. So to going back to your conversation of Amir Khan, like he didn't even like stop to think that why, you know, is Indian society that way, even if he is sort of the harbinger of like Satyamev Jayate and talking about, oh, what is wrong and we shouldn't be doing feticide. Like structurally, you're not creating those kind of stories that Rani Mukherjee can have the pulling power that you can have.
So it's like Bollywood's had a big idea and we just didn't like it very much.
I hate to think
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
someone could become a megastar by playing a toxic lover
That's
character.
his entire brand at this point. Like, even the way in which he appears on social media, and like, there was one instance where he was, I think, asked a question that, people call you toxic. What do you have to say about it? And he said, yeah, if people think I'm toxic, I'm just happy to be a part of the conversation and, raise awareness to this important issue by being the toxic person. Mean, I'm paraphrasing. I'm paraphrasing, but clearly it is appealing to some people. At least what I've seen on Instagram Reels. An old video of Ranbir reacting to Deepika and Sonam's Coffee with Karan episode, the infamous Coffee with Karan episode, where I think someone asked him, um, "Oh, what's your response, Ranbir, to what Deepika was saying?" And the caption of the post said he had such a succinct, or like such a simple response to Deepika, and he said, "I only thought one word. I thought bitch, and that's it." And this reel was like people are like clapping, like, wow, what a comeback from Ranbir. That was 10 years ago, 50, 13 years ago, and now we're like, animal being the innovative thing that Bollywood has to offer. So that's
Exactly,
interesting.
exactly. So yeah, as people say, everything about like women's empowerment and all these narratives, the fact that we are a country that worships goddesses and therefore, the woman as the goddess and whatnot. If it were applicable even to a certain degree, uh, we wouldn't have the kind of violence against women that repeatedly keeps happening in India, and it doesn't even outrage people anymore, right? So it's we are a country where on paper legally we are like very empowered and that women should be getting this, that, and the other, but like structurally going down and across industries, it's just like there's a lot of resentment against this empowerment discourse, and so women are treated even worse, I would say. They are not in this business to create that kind of like empowerment. Very, very few of them are. They are there to make money, and a lot of them, because that's the way our society is. I mean, it just kind of feeds to some aspect of you know men's fantasy of domination, or the way that our patriarchal society is, and that's why people flock to the movies. They did, and the movie did well, and you will get more such.
Yeah, and I mean, going back to what you also said about like the stories that have staying power, I think I mean, this is just my personal take on this, which is that I've always felt like Bollywood always sort of assumes or underestimates its audiences. And like I've actually worked, in the OTT space. I used to work for Hotstar, and I think that that sort of way of thinking even extends into the OTT spaces now, which is when they commission a new project or a film. I think the first consideration, even above story, is the star cast that is attached to it, or if there's a star director which is attached to it, because you know immediately that it'll draw in audiences and they'll watch it. I'm sure that's the case. I'm not even trying to deny that, but it's true, but it's also in the recent past has also not been true, because people really looked forward to Rajkumar Hirani's like new latest release, which was Danki, and it had Shah Rukh Khan in it. And when I actually saw the teaser for that film, I was really excited because it was Rajkumar Hirani and Shah Rukh Khan working together. They've never worked together before. I've really enjoyed Rajkumar Hirani's previous movies, but I never even went to watch the film, because when the trailer came out, I saw the actual trailer and I said, "Oh, okay, I'm not really necessarily all that interested." Because again, like the story didn't really resonate. I didn't feel intrigued, and ultimately, I read the reviews. I mean, I don't think anybody has thought about that film. I don't think it did really well, even in terms of numbers. And I just feel like it, Bollywood does suffer because it underestimates its audiences, and it believes that audiences will respond to a certain type of film, and that certain type of film will have the staying power. But actually, the thing is, the thing that resonates ultimately is honest storytelling, and that's true anywhere. If we think about the very like sort of scattered landscape, media landscape that we live in, um, you know, if you think about music, you have someone like a Taylor Swift who is a superstar right now, and that's because her storytelling and her songs resonate and they cut across. And I think that like bit by bit, as you push the needle of storytelling, there's a lot more that audiences respond to and that they absorb. And as a result, your cinema also sort of evolves and expands. And I also think that Bollywood doesn't have to become a victim to this idea of like the masala film. It should do that. It does that well, but it 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 doesn't just have to limit itself to that. um and at the same time, when in the recent past, when it's tried to make a good masala film, I often feel like that itself is a pastiche. Because even something like a Rocky Rani Ki Prem Kahani, I enjoyed watching that film, but it also very much felt like a pastiche, because it was trying to like take these old Bollywood tropes and make a new Bollywood masala film. Again, I think that that film does not, I don't think it will have like a very long staying power, because again, it's not necessarily a very original idea. So we know that the star is sort of like the central element in any Bollywood film and the industry at large. Um, right now we find us Bollywood finds itself at a sort of, you know, juncture wherein it's kind of hard to imagine that possibly there can be the kind of mega stars that have existed before or currently do exist. But can they exist in the future? That's a big question mark. So I guess, you know, it would be interesting to for us to possibly, as a thought exercise, explore where Bollywood can find its next star or its next big idea. Like for a new star to be born, should they possibly have to emerge from outside existing structures? And as Sanaya and I were thinking about this question, actually, like we thought of Diljit Dosanjh, and you know, recently he announced a tour called the Illuminati, and it's like he'll be playing in lots of cities in India and around the world. And that tour sold out in maybe minutes, and the tickets were going for like 20,000 rupees, 30,000 rupees. The extremely expensive, I would say, tickets. I think the Coldplay tickets in India were cheaper than Diljit Dosanjh's tickets. And there was such high demand for this Punjabi artist. Perhaps, you know, that type of new star, you know, is coming from a completely different place, which is maybe music. And what is really the reason why the star is resonating? What is it about his music? And, you know, even to go back to your point in terms of like stars influencing Bollywood's expansion globally, you know, so it's interesting to possibly even think about it from that perspective. And we were wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
In my book, I give kind of this big picture theorization, like stars and structure, and how it's relational. So there's one other idea that is in the book. Like whenever there is a moment of flux, you know, there is a space for agency, right? And so I talk about towards the end of my book that moment in Hollywood where like conglomerate Hollywood has always been very hierarchical, very top down, but then the streaming companies come and break up that hierarchy. So then there comes like this moment of agency, moment of flux, where stars like Reese Witherspoon, like Brad Pitt, like can have their production companies and create Oscar-nominated movies and kind of assert power in ways that the Bollywood star has always had, right? Structure, because that structure has existed here. Like even though I talk about okay, the industry has changed and the kind of power that a Shah Rukh Khan had, like being one of the richest actors in the world and always making the Forbes lists for India, maybe there wouldn't be a star like that. However, Indian stars, whether it's Ranbir Kapoor, whether it is whoever, they do have like a profit sharing model because that's already established. They have their own production companies. There is also that moment of flux for India, right? And that is why you have Netflix and Amazon coming in. Circling back to your first question, Sanaya, about diversity, like talking about diversity discourses. So you have like a person like Anushka Sharma set up her company and sign a deal to make more women-oriented movies with certain global platforms and so on. So there is that moment of agency where somebody who is maybe liminal because of their gender can assert power, right? But even so, there are certain hierarchies that are being recreated in that, like Alia Bhatt seems to have set up like the most successful brandscape in that sense. But also at the same time, there is the space for Ali Fazal and Richa Chadda to set up their production company and create a global film. And something that was unique and new that Aishwarya Rai really had to like tried to do and had that kind of switching power because she had this excessive aesthetic capital and came at a certain moment to be the crossover star. That kind of crossover is really easy now in India because the structure exists. Like I said, like the talent agencies, like there is already a structure in place for them to make that kind of move. So there's some kinds of things that they have more access to. So it's interesting that you point out Diljit Dosanjh because unlike the US, where the music industry and the film industry are very separate, in India, there isn't a separate music industry. It's all so integrated within the film industry. So the fact that Dosanjh comes from the Punjabi film industry, right? And Punjabi music, as I was telling you earlier in our previous conversation, has always been subsumed within Bollywood, is the mainstay of Bollywood. We keep harping on Hindi, Urdu, but Punjabi is really central to Bollywood vernacular, is part of it, so much a part of it. And so is Bhojpuri now. So there's all these other little dialect North Indian vernaculars that Bollywood as a film entertainment like subsumes within itself. And the fact that, again, this is a moment of flux, and that's why Dosanjh can be the one, is because he's coming from an industry and kind of asserting a connection, marking it in a way that it becomes new and innovative, right? So he had a deal with Warner Music, and that's how he performed at Coachella. He set up his own production company and made one Punjabi film, but he then started getting Bollywood roles, right? So he's coming from sort of a niche vernacular, but also niche industry, and kind of presenting a different kind of model. In Hollywood, you see stars acting in musicals, they actually sing their parts. Bollywood is all about playback. It's only in the recent past, with this newer age of stars, as things have started to change, that you have somebody like Pariniti Chopra or a Priyanka Chopra. Again, it started with Priyanka Chopra. So sing their own songs. So thinking about music, like how it's separate. And so Dosanjh then, like coming from the music space, becomes sort of this interesting anomaly and speaks to a, again, connection with other markets, thinking about his centrality to a niche diaspora market like Canada, for example, UK. Punjabi diaspora is key, which was also one of the reasons for the success of DDLJ, right? It is so much the Punjabi culture, Punjabi diaspora, Punjabi music, like Bhangra, for example, was one of the first kind of global forms. That is one of the ways to understand this kind of globalization of Bollywood and Indian things through music, that the term Bollywood then begins to subsume, but yet it is very much a manifestation of that.
What's so interesting is just thinking, like, as you're saying that, music being like so enmeshed in filmmaking in India, in Bollywood, and how now that you're seeing music artists kind of standing on their own 2 feet, stars singing their own songs. And I see the opposite happening as well, where playback singers are realizing, hey, I sang those songs. I can perform those songs. And Sunidhi Chauhan had a tour, which was very exciting. Jaws were on the floor that she's doing the choreography of all of the songs. She decided, I can do it. I can do the choreography. I can actually perform the songs. And Sonu Nigam is going on a tour as well. So I guess what is interesting is that for a very long time, since we are in a state of flux, and if we can allow ourselves imagining a different kind of future, I generally feel like the movie theater or the cinema hall as a space for congregation might be shifting a little bit, because, we keep seeing, news about PVR trying to think about ways to fill movie theaters once again. What has streaming meant for going to the movies? But that's not the case with concerts. I feel like they are just growing in their appeal even in India. Even if you just look at, the 2 recent tours that were sold out, whether it was Diljit, whether it was Coldplay. I think Coldplay came in 2016 and there was no such rush. I don't know if this is an outcome of the pandemic, where you're seeing all of these clips on social media of people going to concerts and enjoying themselves and then taking clips of the performance and those going viral. So now this is something that everyone just wants to be a part of. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, is there a pathway outside of Bollywood and this film industry, which may even be adjacent to the industry? Because as you said, Swapnil, the adjacency is what makes it plausible for somebody else to influence this global Indian brand, the way in which Diljit is possibly doing it. Maybe Sunidhi can do it. I know she played a few international venues as well. But yeah, just some food for thought.
I think you're right. I mean, and there's a lot of talk about how like movie theaters as like that exhibition space is dead because we have huge screen TVs, and like what really is the difference that you get in in the movie theater experience, and the fact that there's a lot written about it, just that how live events are the next thing. Like even for movie theaters, like just watching those live events with that kind of sound experience is the next thing. With those live events, also kind of some sort of 3D interactive component.
It's a true novelty, right? Like that experience, as opposed to watching. You can't really watch a concert. You can watch a concert at home, but it's really not the same as attending one. And there's no way to replicate that experience at home. So
Mhm. And that's why, streaming and the success of streaming and all of that has happened, is because this has been on the decline for a while, and the pandemic only exacerbated.
I mean, to wrap things up, that perhaps, as you say, like Bollywood is in a state of flux. And I suppose, with the death of even the superstars, there will be perhaps a death of like the Bollywood as we've come to know it. And that'll maybe lead to some new interesting things. And I'm curious to see where that road takes us.
Yeah, true. And like I said, I mean, Bollywood isn't just about the movies. Bollywood is a cultural form. It morphs, it changes. So, what's the next thing it's going to change into? I mean, as it is, it's a huge entertainment industry. And so, yeah, remains to be seen.
Great. But thank you so much, Swapnil, for joining us. This was great. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the conversation.
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. Thinking People podcast is hosted by Sanaya Chandar and Keerti Sharma. Our producer for this episode is Yash Hirave.
You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your audio content. Be sure to follow us at Thinking People Pod on Twitter or X, and at Thinking People Pod on Instagram. If you'd like to get in touch, write to us at thinkingpeoplepodcast@gmail.com.
Stay tuned for our next episode.